All right, this video is all about triangle congruence and some shortcuts that we can use to prove two triangles are congruent. Now we know that when two triangles are congruent, every pair of their corresponding sides are congruent and every pair of their corresponding angles are congruent. But it really isn't truly necessary to establish all 6 pairs of those congruent corresponding parts in order to demonstrate that two triangles are congruent. And that's what this video is all about. So the first condition or the first criteria we'll need to meet in order to demonstrate that two triangles are congruent to one another is to show that all 3 pairs of sides in one triangle are congruent to all 3 pairs of sides in another triangle. And because we're talking only sides here, we're talking 3 pairs of sides, the name we have for this condition is side, side, side. Here's what this says. If we have a first pair of sides in one triangle congruent to a first pair of sides in a second triangle, and we know the second pairs of sides in each triangle are both also congruent, and we know that the third pairs of sides are also congruent, we can conclude that those two triangles are congruent by side, side, side. In other words, they have 3 pairs of congruent corresponding sides. So in other words, we don't have to demonstrate or show anything about the angles. So that's the first condition that we're going to be looking for. The second criteria that it's possible to demonstrate congruent triangles using is something called side angle side. Now this says 2 sides in the included angle of one triangle are congruent to 2 sides in the included angle of a second triangle. Here's what that's going to look like in your picture. There's one pair of congruent sides. My green are a second pair of congruent sides. And what's really important here is that in order to establish that this relationship exists, we must have a pair of angles that joins the 2 pairs of sides. So in my diagram, I highlighted those pairs of sides, purple and green. In order for this relationship to exist, we must have the angle that joins the purple and the green. If we had an angle other than that joined the purple and green, say in other words, if this were our pair of angles here and here, we wouldn't have side angle side because we wouldn't have the angle that joins the purple side together with the green side. So that's really, really, really important that we have the angle that joins our pairs of congruent sides together. And that criteria or that condition is known as side angle side. And then lastly, the third condition that we're going to be looking to meet here today is called angle side angle. This says that when 2 angles in the included side of one triangle are congruent to 2 angles in the included angle of a second triangle, the 2 triangles are congruent. So here in the diagram, I've got my blue angles that are congruent to each other. I've got my green angles that are congruent to each other. In order to have this angle side angle to get criteria, notice that the sides are between the angles right in the name. I have to have the sides that join those 2 angles together. So the side that joins the blue and the green angle together in the first triangle is going to be that red side. The side that joins those 2 angles together in the second triangle is also going to be the red side. So that is indeed what angle side angle is going to look like. What we're going to do now is we're going to look at some pairs of triangles and try to decide using these 3 sets of criteria whether or not we can conclude that they're congruent. So probably in the beginning, for most students, it's easiest to look at these pictures and say, is this side, side, side? Is it side angle side? Is it angle side angle? And as we get better at doing this, you'll be able to hopefully just look at the diagram and say, yep, it's side angle side, or yes, it's angle side angle. But for now, we're going to use process of elimination. So I'm going to look at the first picture and say, is this an example of side, side, side? Do I have 3 pairs of sides in the first triangle congruent to 3 pairs of sides in the second triangle? Well, in looking at the picture, I only have 1 pair of congruent sides. So for that reason, can't be side, side, side. The second criteria, side angle side. Again, looking at the picture, I only have one pair of congruent sides. For this criteria, we need two pairs. Can't have it. So the last thing I'm going to ask myself, do I have angle side angle? Well, there's a pair of congruent angles at the top. There's a pair of right angles that are going to be congruent at the bottom. In order to have angle side angle, I'd have to have the pair of sides that connects the blue and the green angles. And I do indeed have the pair of sides that connects the blue and the green angles. So this is an example of angle side angle. Second one, I'm going to approach the same way. I'm going to ask myself, do I have three pairs of congruent sides? And the answer to that is, looking at the picture, yes, indeed, I do have three pairs of congruent sides. So this is an example of side, side, side. Looking at the third diagram, again, I think it's probably easiest when you start to look at this by process of elimination. Ask yourself the question, do I have three pairs of congruent sides? The answer to that, no. Number two, do I have side angle side? Well, this is going to require a little bit more analysis because I do have one pair of congruent sides. I do have a second pair of congruent sides. In order for this to be side angle side, I'd have to know that the pair of angles that joins my green and my blue sides together are congruent. So in looking at the picture, I see that yes, indeed, I do have the pair of angles in between or included by my congruent sides. This is side angle side. Number four. Again, I'm going to work right down through this list, process of elimination. Do I have three pairs of congruent sides? The answer to that is no. Number two, do I have two pairs of sides? Well, in looking at my picture, I have no pairs of sides. So that has to be written off as well. And number three, well, I have two pairs of angles. I don't have any pairs of sides. And in order to use angle side angle, I'd have to know a pair of congruent sides. Since I don't have any pairs of congruent sides, I have to eliminate that one as well, leading me to believe that these two triangles are not necessarily congruent. Number five, when I look at the picture, I don't see any pairs of congruent sides marked in the diagram. But here's where you have to be intuitive and you have to use your knowledge of geometry. We have, in this particular diagram, we've got two triangles. I'm going to color code the one on the top green so I can talk about the green triangle. And I'm going to color code the guy on the bottom yellow so that I can talk about the yellow triangle. And while in this particular diagram there are no pairs of congruent sides that are marked, these two triangles share a pair of sides. The pair of shared sides runs right up the middle, side JL. And here's what you have to recognize. If side JL measures 5 centimeters in the green triangle, it also has to measure 5 centimeters in the yellow triangle. They're the same pair of sides. So even though this isn't marked in the picture, isn't marked in the diagram, because these two triangles share this pair of sides, they have to be congruent. Anytime something shares a pair of sides, I'm going to mark them congruent with an X. So now this brings a whole new dimension to this problem, because even though they're not marked congruent, I can conclude that they are, which again gives me some more information to work with in this problem. So this is not side, 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 because I do not have three pairs of congruent sides. So I'm going to eliminate that as a possibility. In order to have side angle side, I'd have to have two pairs of congruent sides. I only have one, so I can eliminate that as a possibility. But what I do have here is I have my blue angles, I have my green angles, I have the pair of sides that connects them. So this is indeed angle side angle. So a big idea here, look for shared sides, because even though they won't be marked congruent in the diagram, you have to realize that they are indeed going to be congruent. Number 6, in looking at the diagram, the first thing I'm going to do is look for shared sides, but these two triangles don't have any of those shared sides. What I do see looking at the diagram, though, is that these two triangles have a pair of vertical angles at A. So this is going to be another key idea that you're going to have to look for. Even though they're not marked congruent in the picture, all vertical angles are also going to be congruent. So again, if they're not marked, mark your vertical angles congruent. So again, I'm going to run down the list. Not 3 pairs of congruent sides, so not side, side, side. Here we've got 2 pairs of angles, or sorry, excuse me, 2 pairs of sides, the green and the purple. We've got those vertical angles which join those 2 sides together. That's a side angle side. So again, we've built a couple ideas here. Look for shared sides, look for vertical angles. So those are going to be the first things I look for when I go to number 7. No vertical angles, but these 2 triangles do share a pair of sides up the middle. I'm going to mark those 2 congruent, and then I'm going to run through my list. Not side, 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 because there's not 3 pairs of sides. Not side angle side, because I need 2 pairs of congruent sides for that, and I only have 1. So I've got a pair of angles at the top. I've got a pair of congruent angles at the bottom. I know the sides that join the purple with the blue angles are congruent. That's an angle side angle. I'm going to have you go ahead and complete for the rest of this assignment the rest of the examples on page 23 and on page 24. But before you look at your before you make your conclusion or draw your conclusion, I want you to look for shared sides. And I want you to look for vertical angles. So make sure you're looking for those 2 parts in the diagram before you draw your conclusion. And we'll go over your answers to these and see what you found out the next time that you come back to class. As always, thank you for the gift of your time. I hope that you've learned something by watching the video. But if you have any questions, jot them down right here, right now, so that you'll remember to ask the next time that you come back to class.